Sarah Martinez walked through the crowded hallways of Lincoln High School with her head held high, despite the whispers and stares that followed her every step. At 17, she had learned to ignore the comments about her clothes. While other students wore designer jeans and trendy tops, Sarah chose practical military surplus clothing from the local army store downtown. Her father's old combat boots, polished to a mirror shine, clicked against the linoleum floor as she made her way to her locker. The oversized camouflage jacket she wore belonged to her older brother Miguel, who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before being killed in action 3 years ago. The fabric still carried the faint scent of his cologne, a comfort Sarah couldn't bring herself to wash away. "Look at her," whispered Jessica Chen to her group of friends near the water fountain. "Does she think she's some kind of soldier or something? It's embarrassing." Sarah pretended not to hear as she spun the combination on her locker. She had grown used to the mockery ever since she started wearing Miguel's clothes to school. What these students didn't understand was that every thread held meaning for her. The jacket wasn't just clothing, it was armor against a world that seemed determined to break her spirit. Her family had struggled financially since Miguel's death. The military death benefits helped, but they weren't enough to cover all the expenses of keeping their small house in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona. Sarah's mother, Carmen, worked double shifts at the local diner, while her father, Roberto, picked up construction jobs whenever his back injury allowed. There simply wasn't money for trendy clothes that would make her fit in with her classmates. More importantly, Sarah didn't want to fit in. She wanted to honor her brother's memory and follow in his footsteps. Every morning, she would stand in front of the mirror in her small bedroom, adjusting Miguel's dog tags around her neck and reminding herself of the promise she had made at his funeral. She would serve her country just as he had, and she would make him proud. The bell rang for first period, and Sarah gathered her books from her locker. As she walked toward her advanced placement history class, she overheard more comments from her classmates. Brad Morrison, the quarterback of the football team, was holding court near the trophy case, entertaining his friends with his impression of Sarah's military walk. "Check it out," Brad said, exaggerating his posture and taking deliberate, measured steps. "I'm Sarah Martinez, reporting for duty at the cafeteria, sir." His friends erupted in laughter, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. She quickened her pace, but not before hearing Ashley Williams add, "Someone should tell her that playing dress-up doesn't make you a real soldier. My dad says women don't belong in combat anyway." Sarah's hands clenched into fists, but she forced herself to keep walking. She had learned that responding to their taunts only made things worse. Instead, she channeled her anger into determination. She would prove them all wrong. In AP History, Sarah took her usual seat in the front row. Mr. Thompson was discussing the Gulf War, and Sarah found herself completely absorbed in the lesson. She raised her hand frequently, contributing insights she had learned from reading Miguel's military history books and watching documentaries about modern warfare. "Excellent point, Sarah," Mr. Thompson said after she explained the strategic importance of air superiority in desert warfare. "You clearly have a deep understanding of military tactics." Behind her, she heard someone mutter, "Of course she does. She lives in her little army fantasy world." During lunch, Sarah sat alone at a table near the window, eating the peanut butter sandwich her mother had packed for her. She watched as other students gathered in their social groups, laughing and sharing stories about their weekend plans. Sarah's weekends were different. She spent them at the local army recruiting station, talking to Sergeant First Class Johnson about military careers and physical fitness requirements. As she ate, Sarah noticed a commotion at the popular table across the cafeteria. Brad Morrison was standing on his chair, once again performing his mockery of her military bearing. This time, he had enlisted Ashley Williams and 2 other girls to play along, pretending to march in formation while he barked fake orders. "Attention, soldiers!" Brad called out in an exaggerated drill sergeant voice. "Time for mess hall duty. Martinez, drop and give me 20 push-ups for wearing your costume to school." The entire cafeteria had turned to watch the performance. Students pulled out their phones to record the spectacle, already planning to post it on social media. Sarah felt every eye in the room on her, waiting to see how she would react. She finished her sandwich deliberately, wiped her hands on her napkin, and stood up slowly. For a moment, the cafeteria fell silent, wondering if Sarah would finally break and either flee in tears or confront her tormentors. Instead, she walked calmly to the trash bin, disposed of her lunch wrapper, and headed for the exit without looking back. The disappointed murmurs from her classmates followed her out of the cafeteria. They had wanted drama, but Sarah refused to give them the satisfaction. She had learned discipline from studying military protocols and reading about soldiers who had faced far worse challenges than high school bullies. After school, Sarah took the city bus to the Army recruiting station downtown. The small office was located in a strip mall between a pizza restaurant and a dry cleaner. Sergeant First Class Johnson was expecting her, as she visited every Tuesday and Thursday after school. "How was school today, Martinez?" the sergeant asked as Sarah entered the office. Johnson was a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, a tall woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that Sarah admired. "The usual, Sergeant," Sarah replied, settling into the chair across from Johnson's desk. "Nothing I can't handle." Johnson studied Sarah's face for a moment. "You know, when I was in high school, kids made fun of me too. Said I was too tough, too serious. Some people don't understand dedication until they see it pay off." Sarah nodded, appreciating the sergeant's understanding. Over the past 6 months, Johnson had become more than just a recruiter to Sarah. She was a mentor and a role model, showing Sarah what it meant to be a strong woman in the military. "I brought your practice ASVAB results," Johnson said, sliding a folder across the desk. "You scored in the 95th percentile again. With scores like these, you could qualify for any military occupational specialty you want." Sarah opened the folder and looked at her scores. Mathematics knowledge, word knowledge, paragraph comprehension, arithmetic reasoning, she had excelled in every category. Her dedication to studying was paying off, and she felt a surge of pride knowing that Miguel would be proud of her academic achievements. "Have you given any more thought to what career field interests you?" Johnson asked. "Aviation," Sarah answered without hesitation. "I want to be a helicopter pilot." Johnson smiled. "That's a competitive field, but, with your scores and your determination, I think you have an excellent chance. The Army is always looking for qualified women to serve as pilots." As the afternoon session continued, Johnson explained the requirements for becoming a warrant officer and helicopter pilot. The training would be intense, lasting nearly 2 years from initial flight training through advanced aircraft qualification. Sarah absorbed every detail, taking careful notes in a composition notebook she kept specifically for military information. When Sarah arrived home that evening, she found her parents sitting at the kitchen table, looking over bills and bank statements. The worried expressions on their faces told her everything she needed to know about their financial situation. "Mija," her father said, looking up as she entered. "How was school today?" "Good, Papa," Sarah replied, not wanting to burden them with stories about the bullying. "I stopped by the recruiting station. Sergeant Johnson thinks I should consider applying for a military scholarship." Her mother looked up hopefully. "A scholarship? For college?" "For military training," Sarah explained. "If I enlist after graduation, the Army will help pay for college later. Plus, I'll have a career and steady income." Her parents exchanged glances. They had always supported Sarah's military aspirations, understanding that it was her way of honoring Miguel's memory. But they also worried about sending another child into harm's way. "We're proud of you, Mija," her mother said softly. "Miguel would be proud too." That night, Sarah lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling of her small room. Miguel's medals hung in a frame on the wall, illuminated by the streetlight outside her window. She had arranged her room like a military barracks, with her few belongings organized precisely and her bed made with hospital corners every morning. Tomorrow would bring more challenges at school, more mockery from classmates who couldn't understand her dedication. But Sarah had learned to find strength in their ridicule. Every laugh at her expense, every cruel comment about her military surplus clothing, only strengthened her resolve to prove them wrong. She thought about the Apache helicopter posters on her wall, the aircraft she dreamed of piloting someday. Sarah had researched everything about the AH-64 Apache, its weapon systems, its armor capabilities, its role in modern warfare. She knew that fewer than 50 women had ever qualified as Apache pilots, making it one of the most exclusive positions in military aviation. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah made a silent promise to Miguel and to herself. She would endure whatever challenges lay ahead. She would earn her place in the army, earn her wings as a pilot, and show everyone who had doubted her that determination and character mattered more than designer clothes and social status. The military surplus clothing she wore wasn't a costume or a fantasy. It was preparation for the future she was building, one day at a time, despite the laughter and scorn of those who couldn't see past her humble appearance to the soldier's heart beating beneath Miguel's old jacket. 3 years had passed since Sarah Martinez graduated from Lincoln High School. The girl who once walked those hallways in military surplus clothing was now Second Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, standing at attention in her crisp Army dress uniform at Fort Rucker, Alabama. The transformation had been remarkable, but the journey to get there had tested every ounce of her determination. After graduating as valedictorian of her high school class, Sarah had enlisted in the Army with a guaranteed slot for flight training. The first challenge came during basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. The drill sergeants were tough, but Sarah's years of preparation and physical conditioning served her well. While other recruits struggled with the demanding schedule and military protocols, Sarah thrived. Her bunkmates quickly learned about her background and her brother Miguel's service. Unlike her high school classmates, these future soldiers respected her dedication and her reasons for joining. Sarah found herself becoming an informal leader among the female recruits, helping others adjust to military life and standards. The real test came during Warrant Officer Candidate School, where Sarah competed with the best and brightest soldiers for the opportunity to become an Army aviator. The academic workload was intense, covering everything from aerodynamics and meteorology to military law and leadership principles. Sarah's high ASVAB scores and her self-disciplined study habits gave her an advantage, but the competition was fierce. During flight school, Sarah faced her greatest challenge yet. Learning to fly helicopters required a completely different set of skills than anything she had experienced before. The UH-72 Lakota trainer aircraft was unforgiving of mistakes, and Sarah had to overcome her initial struggles with spatial orientation and multitasking in the cockpit. Her flight instructor, Chief Warrant Officer 5 Rebecca Stone, was a 20-year veteran who had earned her reputation as one of the toughest trainers in the program. Stone had been one of the first female Apache pilots in the Army, and she demanded nothing less than perfection from her students. Martinez, Stone called out during one particularly challenging training flight. "You're overthinking the approach. Trust your instruments and trust your training." Sarah was attempting her first solo autorotation, a critical emergency procedure that every helicopter pilot must master. The aircraft was heavy, the winds were gusting, and Sarah could feel sweat beading on her forehead inside her flight helmet. This was the moment that would determine whether she continued in the program or was transferred to a different military career field. "I've got it, ma'am," Sarah responded through her radio headset, fighting to keep her voice steady. She pulled collective pitch, adjusted the cyclic control, and felt the helicopter respond to her inputs. The landing was rough but successful, and Sarah felt a surge of accomplishment as the aircraft settled onto the landing zone. After completing primary flight training, Sarah faced another selection process for her aircraft assignment. She had maintained her focus on becoming an Apache pilot, even though the requirements were among the most demanding in military aviation. The AH-64 Apache was the Army's premier attack helicopter, and only the top graduates were selected for Apache training. The selection board was intimidating. 5 senior warrant officers and 2 field-grade officers sat across from Sarah in a sterile conference room at Fort Rucker. Her service record, flight scores, and psychological evaluations were spread across the table in front of them. "Miss Martinez," the board president began, "your academic and flight performance have been exceptional. However, the Apache program is extremely demanding. What makes you think you have what it takes to succeed in this platform?" Sarah thought back to all the years of preparation, all the mockery she had endured, and all the promises she had made to Miguel's memory. "Sir, I've been preparing for this opportunity since I was 17 years old. I understand the challenges, and I'm ready to meet them. The questioning continued for 30 minutes, covering everything from her motivation to her technical knowledge of the Apache systems. Finally, the board president dismissed her with the standard phrase, "Thank you, Miss Martinez. You'll receive notification of our decision within 48 hours." Sarah waited anxiously for 2 days before receiving the call that would change her life. She had been selected for AH-64 Apache training at Fort Rucker. The 9-month program would push her to her absolute limits, but she was ready for the challenge. Apache training was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. The aircraft was exponentially more complex than the training helicopters she had flown previously. The cockpit was filled with advanced avionics, weapons systems, and targeting equipment that required thousands of hours to master completely. Her instructor pilot for Apache training was Chief Warrant Officer 3 Marcus Rivera, a combat veteran with multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Rivera was known for his technical expertise and his ability to prepare new pilots for the realities of combat aviation. The Apache isn't just a helicopter, Rivera explained during Sarah's first ground lesson. It's a weapons platform designed to find, fix, and destroy enemy forces. Everything you do in this aircraft has the potential to save lives or take them. That's a responsibility you need to understand and accept. Sarah absorbed every lesson with the same intensity she had brought to every other aspect of her military training. She studied aircraft systems manuals late into the night, practiced emergency procedures until they became automatic responses, and slowly built her proficiency in the complex aircraft. The Apache's tandem seating arrangement placed the pilot in the rear seat and the co-pilot gunner in the front seat. Both crew members needed to be proficient in all aircraft systems, weapons employment, and tactical procedures. Sarah excelled in both positions, demonstrating the multitasking abilities and situational awareness that made excellent Apache aviators. During one particularly challenging training mission, Sarah was flying as pilot in command while Rivera served as her instructor in the front seat. They were conducting a simulated close air support mission, providing fire support to ground forces engaged with simulated enemy positions. "Contact front, 2 o'clock, Rivera called out, identifying a target through the Apache's sophisticated targeting system. "Infantry in the open, danger close to friendly forces." Sarah maneuvered the helicopter into an attack position while Rivera operated the 30mm chain gun and Hellfire missile systems. The coordination required between the two crew members was precise and demanding, requiring constant communication and trust. "Gun, gun, gun," Rivera called out as he engaged the simulated targets. Sarah maintained the aircraft in a stable hover while compensating for the recoil from the weapons systems. The mission required split-second timing and absolute precision to avoid hitting friendly forces. As the training progressed, Sarah's confidence and competence grew steadily. She was learning to think like a combat pilot, making tactical decisions under pressure while maintaining proficiency in the technical aspects of flying the complex aircraft. The final phase of Apache training included a comprehensive examination covering all aspects of aircraft operation, weapons systems, emergency procedures, and tactical employment. Sarah had prepared for months for this moment, knowing that failure would mean starting over in a different aircraft or possibly leaving flight status altogether. The flight examination lasted 4 hours and covered every skill and procedure Sarah had learned during training. She demonstrated emergency procedures, weapons employment, formation flying, and tactical maneuvering. Her performance was flawless, earning her the recognition as one of the top graduates in her Apache class. On graduation day, Sarah stood with 23 other newly qualified Apache pilots as they received their aviator wings and certificates. Looking out at the audience, she saw her parents, Roberto and Carmen, sitting in the front row with tears of pride in their eyes. They had made the long journey from Phoenix to Alabama to witness their daughter's achievement. After the ceremony, Sarah's parents approached her with obvious emotion. Her father, Roberto, struggled to find words as he looked at his daughter in her dress uniform with the distinctive aviator wings pinned to her chest. "Miguel would be so proud," Carmen whispered as she embraced Sarah. "We're all so proud of you, Mija." Chief Warrant Officer Rivera approached the family with a smile on his face. "Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, your daughter is an exceptional pilot. She has the skills and the character to succeed in any mission the Army gives her. As the celebration continued, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The years of mockery and ridicule from her high school classmates seemed like a distant memory now. She had proven that determination and character were more important than social acceptance or material possessions. Her first assignment would be to the 1st Attack Reconnaissance Battalion at Fort Hood, Texas. Sarah would be joining a unit with a distinguished combat record and the possibility of deploying to support ongoing military operations around the world. That evening, Sarah called Sergeant First Class Johnson, her former recruiter who had become a friend and mentor over the years. Johnson had followed Sarah's progress through training and had been instrumental in helping her navigate the challenges of military life. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Martinez," Johnson said warmly. "I always knew you had what it took to succeed. How does it feel to be an Apache pilot?" "It feels like the beginning," Sarah replied. "I've achieved the goal I set for myself in high school, but now I need to prove myself as a combat aviator." Johnson laughed. "Knowing you, I have no doubt you'll excel at whatever challenges come next. You've already overcome more obstacles than most people face in a lifetime." As Sarah prepared for her move to Fort Hood, she thought about the promise she had made to Miguel years earlier. She had honored his memory by following in his footsteps and exceeding even her own expectations. The girl who had been mocked for wearing military surplus clothing was now a commissioned officer and a qualified combat pilot in one of the world's most advanced attack helicopters. The transformation was complete, but Sarah knew that her real test would come when she joined her unit and began preparing for combat operations. The Apache helicopter that had once existed only in her dreams was now her responsibility and her weapon. She was ready to prove that she belonged among the elite ranks of Army aviators, regardless of what anyone had thought about her humble beginnings. The sun was beginning to set over Phoenix, Arizona, as Captain Sarah Martinez piloted her AH-64 Apache helicopter toward Lincoln High School. 7 years had passed since she graduated from those same hallways where students had mocked her military surplus clothing. Now, she was returning as a decorated combat veteran and one of the most experienced Apache pilots in the United States Army. The flight from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson had taken 90 minutes, giving Sarah time to reflect on the incredible journey that had brought her back to her hometown. She had completed 2 combat deployments to Afghanistan, earned her captain's bars, and was now serving as a flight instructor at the Army's premier aviation training facility. Her co-pilot for today's demonstration flight was Chief Warrant Officer 4 Jennifer Adams, a fellow veteran with extensive combat experience. Adams had volunteered to accompany Sarah on this special mission when she learned about the background and significance of the school visit. Phoenix approach, Army Helicopter 27457 requesting clearance for demonstration flight over Lincoln High School, Sarah transmitted to the air traffic controllers. Army 457, you are cleared for demonstration flight as coordinated. Maintain altitude no lower than 500 feet above ground level, came the professional response from the tower. Below them, Sarah could see the familiar campus where she had spent 4 years preparing for this moment without even realizing it. The school had grown since her graduation, with new buildings and expanded athletic facilities. But the main hallways where she had endured years of ridicule remained unchanged. The timing of today's visit was not coincidental. Lincoln High School was hosting its annual Career Day, an event where professionals from various fields spoke to students about different career paths. Sarah had been invited by her former AP history teacher, Mr. Thompson, who had tracked her military career through social media and news articles about female combat pilots. What made this visit even more special was that many of her former classmates were now attending the event as well. Brad Morrison had become a physical education teacher at a middle school across town. Ashley Williams was working as a real estate agent. Jessica Chen had become a nurse at the local hospital. They would all be in attendance today, watching as their former classmate demonstrated the Apache helicopter she had dreamed of flying since high school. There's quite a crowd gathering down there, Adams observed as she scanned the school grounds through the Apache's advanced optics systems. Looks like word has gotten out about our little demonstration. Sarah smiled as she began a gentle orbit around the school at exactly 500 feet altitude. The Apache's twin General Electric T700 engines provided a distinctive sound that echoed across the campus, drawing students and teachers outside to witness the impressive display of military aviation. Through her helmet-mounted display system, Sarah could see hundreds of people gathering in the courtyard and athletic fields. Students were pointing up at the helicopter with excitement, many of them pulling out their phones to record videos. Teachers were trying to maintain order while clearly being as fascinated by the aircraft as their students. Phoenix Tower, Army 457 requesting permission to conduct low approach over the school courtyard, Sarah transmitted. Army 457, approved for single low approach, minimum altitude 300 feet. Sarah reduced power and began a carefully controlled descent, bringing the Apache lower for a closer view. The helicopter's sleek profile and weapon systems were clearly visible to the crowd below. The aircraft represented the pinnacle of military aviation technology, and Sarah felt immense pride knowing that she had earned the right to pilot such an advanced weapons platform. As they completed the demonstration flight, Sarah caught sight of a familiar figure standing near the main entrance of the school. It was Mr. Thompson, now graying at the temples but still maintaining the enthusiastic demeanor she remembered from his classroom. He was waving up at the helicopter, and Sarah could imagine the satisfaction he felt knowing that one of his former students had achieved such remarkable success. After landing at a nearby airfield, Sarah and Adams were transported to the school in a military vehicle provided by the local National Guard unit. Sarah had changed into her dress blue uniform, which displayed her combat ribbons, aviation wings, and captain's bars. The transformation from the teenager who had worn military surplus clothing was complete and dramatic. Walking through the front doors of Lincoln High School felt surreal. The hallways looked smaller than Sarah remembered, and the trophy cases now included recognition of her achievements alongside other distinguished alumni. Mr. Thompson had arranged for a display case highlighting Sarah's military career, complete with photos from her flight training and deployment ceremonies. Ladies and gentlemen, Principal Davis announced over the school's public address system, please report to the gymnasium for a special presentation by Captain Sarah Martinez, United States Army. As Sarah entered the gymnasium, she was struck by the sight of hundreds of current students filling the bleachers. But what caught her attention immediately were the familiar faces of her former classmates sitting in a special section reserved for alumni and community members. Brad Morrison was there, looking noticeably uncomfortable as he realized the girl he had once mocked was now addressing the assembly as a decorated military officer. Ashley Williams sat quietly, her expression showing a mixture of surprise and what might have been regret. Jessica Chen had brought her own teenage daughter to the presentation, wanting her to see an example of what determination and hard work could accomplish. Mr. Thompson approached the podium to introduce Sarah. Students and guests, it is my honor to present Captain Sarah Martinez, a 2016 graduate of Lincoln High School who has distinguished herself as one of the Army's most accomplished helicopter pilots. The applause was thunderous as Sarah walked to the podium. She looked out at the audience, remembering all the times she had sat in these same bleachers, dreaming of a future that seemed impossible to many of her classmates. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, and thank you all for this warm welcome, Sarah began. 7 years ago, I walked these same hallways as a student with big dreams and simple clothes. Some of you might remember the girl who wore military surplus to school every day. A murmur went through the audience as current students looked to their teachers and parents for context. Sarah's former classmates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, realizing that their past behavior was about to be addressed directly. I wore those clothes not because I couldn't afford better ones, though money was tight in my family. I wore them because they represented something I believed in: service, sacrifice, and the memory of my brother Miguel, who died serving our country in Afghanistan. The gymnasium fell completely silent as Sarah continued her presentation. She spoke about the challenges she had faced, both in school and in the military. She described the rigorous training required to become an Apache pilot and the responsibility that came with flying one of the world's most advanced combat aircraft. During my senior year here, some students thought it was funny to mock my appearance and my dreams. They couldn't see past the surface to understand what I was working toward. Sarah's eyes found Brad Morrison in the audience. But their ridicule actually motivated me to work harder and prove that character matters more than clothes. Sarah then transitioned to describing her military career, her combat deployments, and the satisfaction she found in serving her country. She talked about the importance of having goals and working systematically to achieve them, regardless of what others might think. "The Apache helicopter you saw today isn't just an aircraft," Sarah explained. "It's a symbol of what's possible when you commit yourself completely to a goal. When I was sitting in these bleachers as a student, that helicopter existed only in my dreams. Today, it's my office." During the question and answer period that followed, students asked about everything from the technical specifications of the Apache to the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated field. Sarah answered each question thoughtfully, drawing on her years of experience and training. One current student, a girl wearing a simple outfit that reminded Sarah of herself at that age, raised her hand nervously. "Captain Martinez, what would you say to students who feel like they don't fit in or who get made fun of for being different?" Sarah smiled warmly at the girl. "I would tell you that being different isn't a weakness, it's your strength. The people who mock you today might very well be working for you someday. Stay focused on your goals, work harder than everyone else, and never let anyone convince you that your dreams are too big." After the formal presentation, Sarah was approached by several of her former classmates. Brad Morrison was among the first to speak with her. "Sarah," he began, clearly struggling with his words, "I owe you an apology. The way we treated you in high school was wrong, and I've regretted it for years." Sarah looked at the man who had once led the mockery against her. "Brad, we were all young and stupid in different ways. What matters is who we became afterward." Ashley Williams approached next, accompanied by her teenage son. "Sarah, I wanted my son to meet you. I've told him about how poorly we treated you in school, and I wanted him to see what you accomplished despite our behavior." As the afternoon continued, Sarah spoke with dozens of current students who were inspired by her story. Many were facing their own challenges with bullying or self-doubt, and Sarah's example gave them hope that their current struggles didn't have to define their futures. Principal Davis presented Sarah with a key to the school and announced that the gymnasium would be renamed the Captain Sarah Martinez Gymnasium in honor of her achievements and her inspiration to current students. As the day drew to a close, Sarah found herself back in Mr. Thompson's classroom, looking at the same desk where she had first learned about military history and strategy. Her former teacher had remained after school to speak with her privately. "You know," Mr. Thompson said, "I always believed you would do something special with your life. You had a focus and determination that was rare in someone so young." "Thank you for believing in me," Sarah replied. "Your history lessons about military strategy actually helped prepare me for some of the tactical situations I faced in combat." As Sarah prepared to leave the school, she took one final walk through the hallways where her journey had begun. The lockers looked the same, the bulletin boards still displayed student achievements, and the trophy cases still gleamed under the fluorescent lights. But everything had changed for Sarah. The girl who had once been mocked for wearing her brother's military surplus clothing was now a respected officer, a combat veteran, and an inspiration to a new generation of students. The Apache helicopter that had appeared over Lincoln High School that day wasn't just a demonstration of military technology, it was proof that dreams, no matter how ambitious, could become reality through dedication and perseverance. As she walked out the front doors for what might be the last time as a visitor rather than a student, Sarah thought about Miguel and the promise she had made at his funeral. She had not only honored his memory but had exceeded even her own expectations for what she could accomplish. The mockery that had once hurt so deeply had become the foundation of her strength. Every cruel comment, every laugh at her expense, every moment of doubt had been transformed into motivation that carried her through the most challenging training and dangerous missions. Sarah Martinez had proven that the girl in military surplus clothing had been preparing for something far greater than her classmates could have imagined. The Apache helicopter circling overhead that day was not just a machine, it was a symbol of what was possible when determination met opportunity, when character overcame circumstance, and when dreams refused to be diminished by the doubts of others.